Let's bring in Dan Perry. He's an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the Associated Press in the Middle East. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Dan, I want to pick up where we left off there with William. Would Israel, do you think, be willing to accept some kind of a negotiated deal between the US and Iran?
Sure, it depends on the terms of the negotiation. I think the question of what Israel accepts is a little bit connected to a naive view that Israel decided to do this in opposition to the U.S. position, and somehow they put Trump in a bad place. I actually have a different view that this is rather coordinated. Trump wanted deniability. I would tend to call it implausible deniability, but you see that he was hedging his bets to see if it's a success. I think it's in the nature of Trump to hitch his wagon to success and then claim credit for it. And so it only took a few days for Trump to start building a very different narrative where he says, I gave Iran 60 days and they didn't play ball. So you saw what happened on the 61st day, more or less treating Israel as a proxy. I think the open question now is whether Trump does what Israel doubtless would like the U.S. to do, which is to attack Fordo with bunker busting bombs that would enable all sides to claim they destroyed Iran's nuclear program, or whether something else happens where, given the weakened position of Iran, Trump decides to go ahead and resume negotiations. But in this case, rather than go along with Tehran's preferred model of prolonged deliberations lasting weeks and months and years, more or less try to dictate some version of terms of surrender, issue another ultimatum that the war will resume unless conditions are met. And I would suspect that the conditions would involve a complete and total handing over of enriched material, a very robust inspection program, and quite probably even more than that, to extend to an end of Iran's project of proxy militias around the region and an ending of its support to an arming of the Houthis, an attempt to still arm Hezbollah, not to mention Hamas and jihad in the Palestinian areas. There's a lot that the world, I think, largely wants of Iran. And I think the regime may well find itself confronted with either a need to accept a realigning of its entire strategic posture vis-a-vis the region, or find its very existence in danger, because the unspoken subtext here, well, in fact, at least from the Israeli side, it's becoming rather spoken, is that it would be really, really great if there was a change of regime in Iran.
Let me ask you about the terms of the deal, which you started talking about there, Dan, because I wonder if J.D. Vance and Steve Witkoff go to Tehran and they have a conversation there, and they're trying to nut out some kind of end to this, as Trump has said. Do you think that Israel would accept, for instance, a continuation of a civilian nuclear program in Iran, or is that a continued red line, as Netanyahu has said?
Well, again, I have some skepticism about the idea that Israel, can really reject a clearly articulated U.S. position. And Israel has too much dependence on the U.S. to really go against U.S. wishes. And yes, I think so. I think in exchange for their survival, the Iranian regime is going to be asked to accept some humiliating terms from their perspective. And maybe the one carrot that can be offered them is indeed enrichment at a civilian level, which is theoretically and legally their right under the non-proliferation treaty, which Iran has signed. So if there is credible and robust verification, there's no real reason why Iran shouldn't be allowed to enrich at a 3 or 6% level, whatever is needed for civilian purposes.
Dan Perry, they're an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the AP in the Middle East. Thanks so much.
Dan Perry is an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the Associated Press in the Middle East. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thanks, as always, for your time, Dan. Before we talk more about what's been happening today, since Netanyahu has been saying this for over 3 decades, as that report covered, that Iran is on the verge of having a nuclear bomb, why do you think he decided to launch these attacks now?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One could be that indeed they had intelligence suggesting Iran was near a breakout capacity or an actual breakout. Another would be coordination with the U.S. You already hear Trump talking about how he gave Iran 60 days to satisfy him in a negotiation, and they did not. And indeed, just last week, they announced the establishment of a new enrichment facility. So Trump says, look what happened on the 61st day. It kind of sounds like most of it was an American operation to put pressure on Iran in negotiations. Beyond that, it's not just Netanyahu saying that Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. Netanyahu is a very, very unreliable narrator and flawed messenger who is disbelieved, generally speaking, on many issues, maybe most issues, by the majority of the Israeli public. But it's the Israeli security establishment that believes this. It's the Israeli intelligence community that believes this. It is the entire political spectrum of Israel that believes this, and they're backed by at least part of the global intelligence community, and we see how good Israel's intelligence.
But they're not
Iran
backed by the global intelligence community, are they, Dan? I mean, if we start with the US, we had the US Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testifying in March that they don't have any evidence that Iran is building a nuclear bomb, and perhaps even more importantly, the International Atomic Energy Agency doesn't believe this.
I think at the end of the day, Israel will be asked to sort of share the intelligence that it was a pretext for the war. And such intelligence can sometimes be misleading. Of course, we know what happened with the supposed intelligence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. But you know what? History is kind to the victor. And if it turns out that the result of the war is good from a Western and international and even regional Arab perspective, I imagine it will quibble with Netanyahu a little bit less. But what I was going to say is that the entire Israeli political spectrum believes this. You're right about Tulsi Gabbard, but she is perhaps an even more flawed messenger than Netanyahu himself. The U.S. intelligence community, which has about 20 agencies, is divided on the issue. And the real divisions have to do with whether they're close to breakout. What is not contestable, and the IAEA confirms this time and again, and it's really not in doubt, is that Iran has been enriching uranium at a 60% level, which is one step below weaponizable and has absolutely no civilian justification whatsoever. So this is why, and this has been going on for some time, which is why it's not just Netanyahu, but even Israeli doves like Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Olmert and others who absolutely believed Iran was preparing for at least threshold weapon status. And the whole thing is shrouded in misdirections and fog. And of course, there's an Iranian fatwa that states that they don't want nuclear weapons, but there's reasons also to disbelieve that fatwa. It was verbal, never written. It was somewhat vague. And so this is a highly complex issue, but what is the bottom line, I think, is that there's a reason why not only the U.S., but 5 or 6 other major powers wasted years and years arguing with Iran. It wasn't because of paranoia, and it wasn't because of a civilian program.
As you say,
I think it was unwise of Trump to walk away from it in 2018, but there's a reason why that deal existed.
Right. You mentioned that Trump walked away from this in 2018. You're not sure whether Israel has been emboldened by the U.S. position. What do you believe? Do you think that the U.S. administration now has a position in how much it supports Israel?
I think Israel would never have dared do this without U.S. acquiescence and coordination. And, their denials are implausible to me. I think to the degree that Israel's had success, and right now, as of today, at this moment, it looks like a major success, that either might compel Trump to jump on the bandwagon, which would have been planned all along as a possibility or a contingency, and actually help complete the quote-unquote job by bunker busting the Fordo nuclear enrichment facility that is way underground that Israel probably cannot reach, and then declare victory. Or if they return to negotiation, which runs a little bit counter to Trump's tweeting of today, then to do so from a position of a very great strength and a lot of latitude afforded by the, what looks like the weakening of the regime to at the level of humiliation, I would say. So it becomes more likely that Trump would issue an ultimatum. And I suspect that ultimatum would involve not just the end of all enrichment, or at least all enrichment beyond the 3.67% level that is allowed under the NPT, but also an end to the project of militias, proxy Iranian-backed militias wreaking havoc in a region and undermining the sovereignty of nations from Lebanon to Syria until recently to Yemen, and also the missile program.
But why would Iran agree to any of that? Iran is a sovereign nation that has the right to enrich uranium, and it also has the right to form its own allies across the region.
Iran has the right to enrich uranium at a 3.67, I believe, level that is civilian. That is the only right they have. Beyond that, of course, the way nations achieved nuclear weapons capability has always been a little bit of take what you can, but you risk sparking the ire of your neighbors if you do this in a way that is not so careful. As for allies, I don't think Iran has the right to create a state within a state in Lebanon and undermine the security of Lebanon and embroil Lebanon in wars that country never wanted with Israel. None of this. Iran does not have the right to foment misery in Yemen and bring about indirectly the deaths of 400,000 Yemenis because of the war created by the Houthi militia backed by Iran and armed by Iran. All this is total nonsense. I mean, no, I'm sorry. Moreover, the Iranian regime is, I would say, illegitimate. It doesn't rule by consent of its people. It rules by fear.
Dan Perry joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you.